All right, well, I suppose I'll get started. This week in CS Essentials, we're going to talk about text editors, specifically Vim and VS Code. Uh, the whole goal of CS Essentials is to practice some skills for CS, and we really think it's important that we understand text editors and why we use text editors, and to just get some idea of some of the options you have with text editors. So briefly, let's talk about how we code. Code is just a way of telling the processor to do specific things um, in a human readable way. So if we take a look at the code on the left, this is pretty readable. We can store all of these operands into a result that we keep in a variable, and then we can do stuff with that variable. If we convert the same code into assembly, which is darn near telling the CPU exactly what to do. Like we have an actual register with actual memory, and we do the operation like directly. We can see it gets a lot longer, it gets a lot less readable, and this is directly translated to the machine code on the right. Now, this isn't all of it. There's way more. This is just a tiny portion of this exact code, but it still gets the point across that the right is unreadable, the middle is less readable, but the left, the code that we actually write, that's a lot more readable. But the whole point of all this is it's just text. Coding is just text. So we can use any variety of text editor to do coding. Um, for example, we can use Notepad on Windows or TextEdit on Mac. Often Linux will come with Vim or Nano. Sometimes Vim is the default, but oftentimes Nano is a good one to have. But some ones that I prefer are VS Code. Vim and NeoVim are great for Linux. Now, I want to point out that I said VS Code and not Visual Studio. That's because VS Code is a text editor, but Visual Studio is an IDE, an integrated development environment. Now, what is that? It's basically a text editor that has a lot more crap dumped on top of it. So you can run code directly from an IDE. Oftentimes you can see memory, and those are all really cool features, but they add a lot of overhead. They make coding just anything way more complicated. And for most things, you just want a text editor, and it'll make it a lot easier. So if you're following along, here are some download links. You can download VS Code while I talk about Vim. And we're going to use Vim on the Flip server, so it's not a huge deal that you get started on that now. And yeah, so if anyone wants the links, I can put them in chat somewhere, or you can just Google it. Honestly, it's pretty easy to find. So if we're going to get started with our demo, let's start with this SSH into flip. I have it aliased, so that makes it rather easy for me. And then on the next slide, we have this cheat sheet. So we'll start talking about this cheat sheet. So if you think about a text editor, like for example, Google Docs, if you want to type something, you can just start typing, right? And then suppose I type this thing, but I want to change a letter in the middle. Well, I can use arrow keys to get over, or I can use my cursor. And the cursor is actually what's really powerful, because if I want to edit something down here, for example, I just click there rather than down, 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 right, 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 right. So the movement with the mouse is very important. So if you're thinking about a text editor in the terminal, which is what Vim was designed for, it needs a similar movement to the cursor, but without using the mouse. So the question is, how do you do that? Because all of your keyboard stuff is bound to letters like typing. So you can't use those unless you have different modes. So that's how Vim tackles this. There's like a movement mode and then an insert mode. And then there's also a visual mode for highlighting stuff. So to get started on just learning how movement works, we need to open a file that has some text in it. A great one is bashrc. So bashrc is going to have a lot of default text that we can move around. So the basic movement that is going to be most of your life is on the home row, or actually shifted over one from the home row, left, down, up, and right. So if you look down at your keyboard, H and L are left and right. So you can move to the right, to the left, and then the two letters in between that are up and down, up and down. Okay, and so get very used to this movement. This will be the basic movement. Some other things you can do are caret. That takes you to the first non-whitespace character. For example, on line 15, is if I was over here and I went caret, takes me to the period. An alternative is 0. That takes you to the absolute beginning. But that's not usually as helpful, so we can just use caret. $sign will always take you to the end. So if I'm over here, $sign takes me all the way to the end. And then if you wanted to move just word by word, you can do that with just W. W takes you to the next word, which is pretty useful, especially in like paragraph type things. You'll notice here it treats this as 3 separate words. 3 separate words, 1, 2, 3. If you don't want if you want it to all be one word, you can use capital W, right? And that's less restrictive on what characters are counted as a word. So I think this will be one word, yeah. So pretty much any white space for capital W. And then same thing goes with B. B is back a word. So you can go back and try all the words there. F will find the next character type, or yeah, it's the next character. So if I press F now, nothing's going to happen. But if I type B, it's going to take me to bare bones because that's the first B. If I type FB again, it'll take me to bones, right? So that's really useful for going along a line really quickly. Like I can see there's a semicolon at the end of the line, so I can do F semicolon. That's another way to get to the end of the line in this case. And then capital F goes backwards. So if I want to get to that apostrophe and don't, I just type an apostrophe. Some faster movement, because this has all been pretty much one line, moving between lines. But if I need to move between paragraphs, I can use curly braces. You can move up and down paragraphs with the curly braces. If you want some faster scrolling that isn't dependent on like the formatting, then you can scroll up and down with Control U and Control D. And then some really fast movement using G. Capital G will take you to the bottom of the file, which is on the next page. And then GG will take you to the top. So that'll take you through a file very quickly. And then the last piece of movement I'm going to talk about is parentheses. So, percent. So see this bracket here? It highlights the matching bracket, and my cursor is on this bracket. If I hit %, it'll take me to the next one. What that's really useful for is in like C, right? You have curly braces in a function. You're not necessarily sure where that closing one is, so you can just hover over the opening and it'll take you right to the closing, and that'll tell you for sure where it closes. And then real quick, so we can start editing a file that isn't our bashrc, here's how we can quit. So we can type :Q, or we can also type capital Z, capital Z. So let's do that. Well, let's not do that in our document. Let's do that in Vim. :Q. and then we can start editing our own file. So I'm gonna start with a hello world Python file. Let me go to my directory here. So vim. If there's no file, so for example, this directory is completely empty. If there's no file, Vim will create one for you. Hello.py. And now we have a new file. If you want to start typing instead of moving around, you gotta leave normal mode and you gotta go into insert mode. And you can do that by pressing I. I allows you to type. In this case, we're gonna print hello. If you want to leave insert mode, you can hit escape. And now you're back to moving. If I wanted to put something at the beginning of this line, like, I don't know, a comment, then I can do capital I, right? So I'm over here on the quotes. I just hit F quote there to get here. If I'm over here in the middle of the line and I want to edit at the beginning of the line, then I do capital I. It takes you all the way to the beginning of the line. And this would be a great way to insert comments. Similarly, there's append. Now, the difference between I and A on a single character, if you're looking at this I, for example, insert will go before the I, and append will go after the I, after. And then on a capital A will take you to the end of the line. So this is great in C when you want to put in semicolons. Another option is O. O is great for starting a new line. This would be like similar to doing capital A, enter. And then if you wanted to throw a line above this current one, you could do capital O. And that's incredible for the editing the top of files where like you might put some include headers or something like import math. Real quick, let's save and quit this file just to make sure that it all works. So we can either do WQ or again ZZ. ZZ does save and quit. And let's do it in this window. And just make sure it all works. Hello.py. Looks like it does. Okay. Ooh. So some other things you can do now that you know how to add text, you know how to move around in a file. Let's start getting some more high level stuff going. For example, copy and paste. Instead of C for copy, Vim decided to use Y. So Y yanks the text that you're looking at, and then P will paste it. So let me yank this line and paste it. Now, commands like yank, delete, and we're going to talk about change, they all are followed by a direction, right? So when I copy, it doesn't know exactly what I want to copy initially, right? Like, do I want to copy a line? Do I want to copy the word, just the character? So it's always followed by a direction. If you hit it twice, then you're telling Vim that you want to copy the line. So if I hit YY, that copies the line. And if you want to check what you have copied, you can always hit P to paste. Now, suppose I just want to copy the current word, for example, print. Then I yank, and remember the direction for a word is just W. So if I want to traverse this word to copy it, I do YW. And then now just to check how to paste it, there we go. It just copied print. D is delete. So if I don't want this print here anymore, I can delete it with D. And then remember, I just want to delete this word, so I can DW. Alternatively, since it was at the end of the line, I could do $, right? Delete until the end of the line. Remember, $, was end of the line. Change is very fun. It is delete and then insert, right? So if I don't want this to say hello anymore, I can change word and make it say goodbye. Let's turn off highlighting because we're not there yet. And then R is similar. It just replaces one letter. So while change can replace, words, lines, whatever. For example, here's changing a line. R just replaces a single character. So if I wanted this O to be a Y, I press R, and then whatever character I type next, it's going to replace that. So here's a 0, and I messed up. R, undo, R, O, and there's an O. Some formatting. So if I was programming in C or something, or in Python especially, indenting is very important. Like if I had, a function here, I would need both of these lines to be indented now. So one option is I could do capital I to insert at the beginning and then tab over. That would be totally fine. But another option I have is the arrows. So I can do arrow. If I did double arrow, then that indicates I want to indent this line. If I want to arrow down, then it'll indent the line below and also this line. So let's fix that line. And you can go to the left, you can go to the right. Equal sign will auto indent. So if I, let's see, if I mess up this line, then double equals will fix it. So Vim has some good intuition for a lot of languages about how to properly indent. And you can select a bunch of lines and have it try and automatically indent it with the equal sign. J will join lines into one. This isn't very useful in code, but it is very useful in like when Vim becomes your main text editor for everything. But one example it could be useful for is comments. So here's a comment here, and here's a short comment here, and clearly they don't need to be on different lines, so I can combine them quickly with J. And then say I don't want them joined together, actually. That's something I didn't want. You can always undo with U. One thing to keep in mind is undo only keeps track for this current file. So if you save and then go back, well, it's not going to remember all the undos before. And with anything that we've discussed, you can throw a number in front and it'll repeat it that many times. So if I want to delete 10 lines from this file, I could type the number 10 and then D for delete line. And it deleted 10 lines down, I think. I'm not sure why it only did 7. That's interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. See, it should have deleted that, but I don't know why it didn't. Nonetheless, you can still prepend a number to any command and it'll do it. So if I want to move 10 to the right, then I can do 10 and then L, and I go 10 characters to the right. And similarly to numbers, you can repeat by just hitting period. So if I delete this line and I decide I want to delete the next line too, well, I hit period and I can keep spamming period. It also works with insert. Like if I print hello on a line and I leave, well, I can hit period and it'll do that same thing again. It'll create a new line and write out hello. And then next to talk about is search. You can press slash to start searching for things. And you can tell that there's a prompt in the bottom left corner. So that's exactly the thing you're searching for. Let's see what happens when we search hello. It gets highlighted with all the instances of hello. And as you're searching, you might get a warning, search hit bottom, continuing at top. That just means that the search had to wrap around to find all of the results. If you're currently on a word, you can always just press asterisk or pound, and it'll find the word that is currently under the cursor. Um, so if you have, for example, a function that you're calling and you don't know where you defined it, this would be one way to find where you defined it. And then if you're trying to find the next occurrence without just scrolling and seeing the highlight, you can just press N and the cursor will automatically move to the next instance. So to show this, I'm going to change word, CW, and type in goodbye. And then I press N and it takes me to the next instance. We get that warning on the bottom telling us that we've wrapped around the file. So now it's reading from the top again. And I can repeat the same thing by pressing period. And now we get goodbye. And if we wanted to go backwards, of course, we could press capital N. Next are Vim commands. So you can put in any command with a colon. There are a lot of commands. For the most part, I don't use many of them, but here are the ones that you might want to use down below. So we've got save. Save is very important. You always want to know how to save. We've got quit, which just quits the file. You can combine those two to get save and quit. You can get no highlighting. So during a search, we find the word that we want. We don't want it highlighted anymore. We can just tell it no highlight, please. A great one is colon a number. So on a bigger file, for example, our bashrc, we can just go to line 40 and see what's up on line 40. That one's very useful if you have an error. So like, let's say I forget this parenthesis, try and run my code, Python hello.py. I get a syntax error on line 10, so I can just go straight to line 10, see what's up. Oh, the line before is missing a parenthesis. So that is very nice. And then find and replace. This is the same syntax as sed. So if you're familiar with sed, this will be very awesome for you. This explains what's going on in the magic section. So let's check that out. Here's the magic section. So this percent tells you for every line in the file, do a replacement. That's what the S is saying. So we're going to find, let's say we don't want it to say goodbye anywhere. Let's find all of the goodbyes, replace it with hi CS essentials. And then let's see what else. G. In case it occurs multiple times in a line, we're gonna do it. So that's what the G stands for. And this command replaces every instance of goodbye with hi CS essentials. Isn't that just wonderful? So you can think of some other text editors you might have used, like Google Docs, where if you want to find and replace, you do all this, you replace here, and then you can replace all. Oftentimes you'll go to the previous or next. This is just so nice, isn't it? Another one that is very nice to know is visual mode. So if you press V, now you start highlighting things as you move around. This is great if you want to copy something specific that you can't really figure out what the movement would be for, you know? like this, you would have to do like 2F space, something like that. Here you can just highlight. Then in visual mode, this is like your movement direction. So all of these commands that take a direction afterward, you can just do when you're in visual mode. So like yank or delete or change. Change is a great one. So if I do V here, change, it'll just delete all the stuff in there and then go into insert mode. Another great one is if you do Shift V, then you're in visual mode, but it highlights the whole line automatically for you. And then when you highlight a whole section, you can indent it however you please. And then you can also auto indent. It failed a little bit because I think it's expecting semicolons. I'm not sure. Let's see. I'm not sure why auto indent failed there, but sometimes it just fails, and that's where you can manually go in and do that. I was making it jump in more afterward by just pressing period, right? Because period will repeat the last command. The most powerful thing in Vim, in my opinion, is the macros. So if you're doing a movement that's very repetitive, right? Like I had an assignment where I had to edit a 25 by 25 matrix in LaTeX. So the matrix format was something like this for a cell. I could copy this, right? And wait, I should just copy this part. So I could copy that. I could paste it to make sure it pastes right. And then 23 more times I could paste. And then I could copy the line, paste it, make sure it looks right. Then 23 more times I paste it. And then I needed to say, make the diagonals all ones. And to just kind of make more clear what's going on. So if I need to make the diagonals all ones here, this would be really tedious, right? Oops, that's not R1, then move over to R1. That would be awful. So we're going to use a macro. So over on the cheat sheet, let's bring the cheat sheet more on screen. There we go. We can start and stop a recording macro with Q, and then Q is followed by a label. So oftentimes I'll just use Q again. So here, if I press Q and then Q again, when the window is highlighted. So now you can see in the bottom left, it's recording. If you're ever stuck recording and you don't know how or why to escape, you can press Q to stop recording. So now that I'm recording, I can replace with 1, and then I can move over to the next 0, and then I can stop recording. And then I can play back with the replay macro key @ so @ and then I need to tell it which macro to replay. So in this case, I bound it to Q. So @ Q will replay the macro. It replaced the 1, then it moved to the next thing. And I can repeat that 23 times. So 23 @ Q. And now you can see the diagonal is all full of 1s. So something really repetitive like that, you can do very quickly with Vim. And then, we can go to line 12 in highlighting mode. That didn't work. Not sure why, but then we can quickly delete this, which is D. So that is pretty much everything I have to say about Vim. With all of these tricks, there is a lot of things you can do. Another thing I can mention is if I wanted to change all of the things inside of these parentheses, I can do CI and then parentheses, and then it'll delete everything inside and allow me to change it. So now I could say goodbye, and we don't want highlighting anymore. So just to repeat, that was, where could I put this? CI dupe, change in parentheses. That might be a good one to note down. But with all these tools, you can very quickly edit files. You can do exactly what you want to do in any given moment. And you can do a lot of really cool stuff very quickly. So that's why we recommend Vim for coding. You can, if you can type and change things as quickly as you're thinking about it, then you're spending more time thinking and less time just trying to get the editor to do what you want it to do. Now, of course, that'll take practice. Initially, Vim will be slower, but I swear that once you get used to it, it is so worth it. So now we're going to pivot to VS Code, and I think there isn't much on the slides about VS Code except extensions. So here's an instance of VS Code. You can start by opening a file, create new file. You can open folders, which is really nice, and that's what you see on the left. Is I have my school files folder open, and so I can see all of my classes in folders, and then projects inside those classes. And it's just a nice simple text editor. Like, here's some code, and you can just edit it like normal. The kicker are the extensions. The extensions make this very customizable. One extension I have is Vim. You can make Vim happen in VS Code. Would you look at this? I'm moving with my keyboard. I did anyway. Some other cool things you can do with VS Code is the remote SSH extension. This is one that I think most people are going to use, at least at OSU, so they can SSH into the Flip servers and edit things almost as though they're on their own machine. So to get an extension, you first just go to the extensions tab on the left. Your quick bar might not be as busy as mine is because I've got, the Git extension, Python, whatever. So you go to the extensions tab on the left. You can then search for SSH, see what they've got. And I recommend this top remote SSH one by Microsoft. And to just show why it's so cool, we go to the Remote Explorer, and I can just open this connection to that same, to Flip. And you can see all of my files here appear on the left in a file explorer. This is done through SFTP. They emulate this using SFTP, which means you don't need a VPN. You just need your typical SSH extension or SSH connection to be able to see all these files. And we can actually edit the same file that we were working on. Here's hello.py. My terminal prompt is the same as it would be on Flip because I'm SSH'd into Flip. And that's what's really powerful about this. So the next thing in VS Code are the language extensions. So for example, I have a Python extension, and it doesn't let you run code, it doesn't let you compile code. But what it does do is it gives you a linter. For example, this tells me it doesn't know what QR code it means. Oftentimes, it'll highlight in yellow when it doesn't know what a particular thing is. In fact, if I open this back up, I think I have the same project here. Like I can try and put this line in there. Let's copy. I did it that way because clipboards are weird. But like if I paste here, paste. Yeah. So it doesn't know what module PIL is. And that's what the Python extension will tell me are things like this, or like when I had this semicolon. Oh my goodness. When I had the semicolon, it's highlighted in red because it's like this shouldn't be here. Even though it'll run, it shouldn't be here. Um, if I had a space there, it's like, everything's broken and it yells at you, right? So these are nice things while you're coding to catch errors before you go and run them. Um, and that comes with the language extension. Some other things it'll do is a debugger interface. So while the extension doesn't provide the debugger, Python provides the debugger, the Python down here. This is the debugger. Um, what it will do is interpret the debugger for you. So if I run and remember how to run this file, right? So I need a -k with some secret key. Here's my secret. And I just do that. Wait, I need to remember how this code works, even though I went over it just the other day. Get OTP, that's what I need. Whoops. Get OTP. So the language extension provided this run button. It knows where my Python executable is. It knows where the interpreter is. And it also knows where the debugger is. So I can, instead of running this file normally, I can debug this file. And it'll run it like normal. And then it'll stop at breakpoints. So I have this breakpoint on this print key, and I can see all of the variables on the left side just automatically. I don't have to specify that I need to watch them. It visually shows you what line you're on. You have these nice buttons to step over or to step out. So this is my favorite feature of VS Code, is being able to visually debug very easily. In the terminal, it's a little more messy and you have to remember all the commands. Another cool feature that extensions can provide are previews. So, for example, in my text workshop, it provides a PDF viewer, which allows you to preview text files. For example, this file for one of my midterms, you can preview it on the right in a PDF viewer. So you can see all the fancy things that text did. It'll also preview readmes. So if I split to the right, usually it'll preview. Maybe I need to get that darn extension. Or I guess readmes are in, oh, that's why, because this is a text readme, not a markdown. Do I have markdown anywhere? Should have one here, right? Yeah, here's markdown. And I can preview to the right. And you can see like even this has live previews. So you can see like down here an example edit, and you can see how it looks, as well as like how to make it look crossed out. So that's another example of like a language extension that can do cool stuff, is like these previews for markdown languages. A neat one is the Docker extension. If you use Docker, I feel like this is a must-have. Other than that, yeah, pretty much the biggest thing about VS Code are the extensions. There are a lot of settings. You can go to preferences and just edit any of these settings. Your extensions will appear in here. For example, here are all the text settings. Some settings have like more complicated requirements. For example, the Vim extension because this extension doesn't actually allow you to have a vimRC, it just hasn't created um, the ability to parse a vimRC. They'll uh, they have instructions on how to edit the JSON, and the JSON is really where all of your settings are. You can see I have like a bunch of text settings, um, some terminal settings. You can have keybinds, like I have one keybind in here somewhere. I can't find it. But if I press Control T, it takes me to the terminal, and then Control T again will toggle back to the editor. So that one's really nice if I quickly want to run something. Um, yeah. So a comparison, I feel like, between Vim and VS Code real quick. Um, VS Code, I feel like, is great for a lot of graphical things. Like you can have these previews on the side. Your debugger is very nice to be able to add breakpoints really quick, to be able to see exactly what line you're running. These are all incredible features that you can get in Vim, but they're a lot harder to get. There's a fork that I mentioned of Vim called NeoVim that makes incorporating a lot of these features a lot easier because it has Lua script built in. But nonetheless, like VS Code is still great for these graphical features. One thing it lacks though is the fact that you have to pick up your mouse for a lot of these things. So like these buttons, I think all have like yeah, they all have keybinds, but like switching between editors is frustrating. Opening a file is frustrating without picking up your mouse. While Vim, you can do all of your coding just with your hands on the keyboard, right? This is incredible on a laptop where you have your trackpad, and your trackpad is really annoying and can cause like muscle strain. I don't know. So just having Vim keep everything on the keyboard is so fantastic. Um, and you can get close to this experience in VS Code with extensions, but I think it's not as great as Vim. Um, I think it's worth noting that you can get like this split screen functionality. Like if you just had two files side by side like this, you can get similar functionality with Tmux. Um, Tmux is a terminal program that lets you tile your window into different terminals. I'm admittedly not too familiar with it, so I'm not comfortable to demo it, but it's very cool once you get it working. Um, and it allows you to have similar, like a layout like you do here. Um, So, like my basic summary, if you're on Linux, no doubt I recommend using Vim. I recommend checking out NeoVim to get extensions, some really cool extensions. But if you're on Windows or you're on Mac, VS Code is a great option. There's some other options as well, like Atom, but Atom was recently deprecated. So the only pioneer of Atom that I knew was Professor Hess, and he uses VS Code now. So um, yeah, as far as text editors go, I think this is the jam. Let's see if there's anything else in the slideshow. No, that's it. Oh, oh, this is very important. So one issue with this SSH extension, like I touted it as incredible. You can just edit remotely as though it's local. You do need to clean up your processes. Sometimes you'll SSH and you won't be able to SSH for literally no reason. Turns out there is a reason. You've used up all your processes. And it's because this remote SSH sometimes doesn't clean up processes well. We don't know why exactly, but you can fix that by going to teach and logging in with your ownid. And then there's a button in here that will terminate all of your processes. And if you're in this problem where you can't log in, you kind of just have to just kill all of your runaway processes. And that'll save you from being, this terrible person who takes up all of the school's resources by running this extension, which, you don't even realize that it's so terrible. You can always check if you're, going over on processes by running the top command in SSH. If you're going over like the recommended terminals, you should be on the top with something like node. So maybe I need to clean up my processes after this, but here I am at the top with node. Yeah, so I think that's everything I have to say about text editors. I know there's some great guys in here who might have some other opinions, but yeah, I think I'll open it up for discussion now if anyone wants to say anything.
I just wanted to add on a little bit about how Vim is really, really customizable. And just like VS Code, it does have a
Mm,
lot of extensions available. The default Vim configuration is pretty minimal. Like it doesn't have things like autocomplete or like highlighting errors and stuff like that. But those are things that are really, really easy to add with plugins.
mm-hmm.
And so, like, if you use Vim for a lot of the time, I definitely recommend playing around with it. My VimRC is something that you can look at as an example. I don't recommend necessarily copying somebody else's VimRC. I think it's best to make your own so that you learn why everything's in there and what it does and how to fix stuff when it's broken. But yeah, like you can install a Vim plugin manager and then have literally any feature you want in Vim because there's a big community of just thousands and thousands of people who make and maintain Vim plugins for anything under the sun.
Right. And I forgot, yeah, I was going to talk more on NeoVim, but um, the big advantage of this fork NeoVim is that it can run plugins asynchronously. So that's the big problem with Vim plugins is something like autocomplete runs synchronously. So every time you type, it has to, run the script in the background, or it has to run the script while you're typing. So if it's anything slower than like 60 milliseconds, then it's just really annoying to the user and just typing feels weird. So that's why,
Yeah, and
um,
that's definitely something to be careful of. If you just start, piling on the plugins like crazy, you can end up in a situation like that. But like the autocomplete plugin that I use runs in a background process and then just communicates with that background
oh,
process
okay.
as a Vim plugin. So like it'll interact with your language server or whatever, and I type stuff and it just goes off and sends requests to the language server in the background, and then they come back without adding any lag to the typing.
Oh, that's pretty clever. Yeah. Oh, and here's the VimRC. This is like the settings that comparable to the VS Code JSON. You can see I have some key maps because I think it's silly that Vim has the movement keys offset from the home row by one, but
Mm-hmm. But then you can't map semicolon to colon. That's what I do.
oh, what? No.
That way I don't have to press shift every time I want to type a command.
I mean, one thing I that hasn't been transparent to you guys is I'm on a Dvorak keyboard, so to be
Oh.
honest, I haven't been using like H, J, and K for movement. I've been holding down my spacebar, and that turns my keyboard into just normal arrow keys or like Vim controls. So I've been faking it this whole time, but you didn't need to know that. But anyway, I feel like that was a good presentation.